Hello and welcome to the Barcast. I'm your host, Nick Barr, coming to you on a Thursday afternoon. Let's nerd out today. I want to talk about aphantasia in the Enneagram. So the question here is, what does the Enneagram have to teach us about aphantasia? And this is my hot take, completely unbacked by anything other than my own intuitions. But I do have a stance on this. If you don't know what aphantasia is, it is a recently discovered condition that you could describe as someone not having a visual imagination. Their mind's eye is blind. So most people, when you say, imagine yourself on a beach and the waves are rolling in and the sand is yellow and there's a palm tree, etc., they're actually producing visual imagery as part of that imagining. A small number of people don't do that. They think of themselves as imagining, but their imagination, it might be kinesthetic, energetic, it might be verbal, there might be sort of fragmented collages as opposed to sort of working visual fantasy, etc. So we don't really know much about this condition. We don't really know what the stakes are. It doesn't seem to affect your ability to become, let's say, an artist. In fact, one of the more famous people with aphantasia is one of the visionaries behind Pixar. So it's kind of a curiosity. But if you go on Reddit, people are really interested in it. And I think some people struggle, with aphantasia. And I know for myself, there's been a spiritual question of like, sometimes it feels like a block of sorts. And I said, for myself, there are probably a lot of different reasons why someone might have this condition. It's more of a symptom, right, than anything else. But when I reflect on my own symptom of aphantasia, a couple of things. One is I do have visuals in my dreams or in dreamlike states. So biologically, I'm capable of this capacity. There's sort of a quality of being blocked around producing visual imagery that I have been, interested in. And so what I'm about to talk about is sort of grounded in my own introspection here and grounded in my knowledge of the Enneagram. So I'm going to draw what's known as the withdrawing stance. And my belief is that if someone were to do research and find out the Enneagram number of people who describe themselves as having aphantasia, my belief is they're going to be in one of these three numbers, the 9, the 4, and the 5. And these are what Suzanne Stabile describes as the numbers in the withdrawing stance. So what is it that unites these numbers? The 4, you'll know, is in the feeling triad. The 5 is in the thinking triad. And the 9 is in the doing triad. But all three numbers are doing repressed. So the 4 is feeling dominant and then moves to thinking and then back to feeling. The 5 is thinking dominant and then moves to feeling and then back to thinking. And the 9, being at the center of the doing triad, is both doing dominant and doing repressed. If this language isn't familiar to you, I highly recommend the work of Suzanne Stabile. She has some of the most kind of crystal clear, simple introductions to the Enneagram that are also very, very deep. And she describes in her book, The Journey Toward Wholeness, a barbecue with 4s, 5s, and 9s. And they're all at this barbecue. It's not that they're not doing, but they're uncomfortable in some ways in doing. She writes, on an ordinary day when life is somewhat routine, all three numbers generally do what they want to do, which may not be what needs to be done. Not suggesting that they don't perform well at work or that they're slackers regarding responsibilities in the groups they belong to, But I am suggesting that since they are doing repressed, they don't imagine that what needs to be done is theirs to do. They're missing the self-assurance, self-determination, and confidence that are learned by doing. In addition, they're often blind to the possibility that they should do something when other people are involved. They might analyze how something could be improved or even fixed. They might even suggest solutions or other ideas, but they really take the initiative to do something about it. They tell me that what they could do doesn't even cross their minds. So this withdrawn stance, 4s, 5s, and 9s are at home in their interior world. And doing and acting in the world doesn't come naturally to them. The other thing you can say about the withdrawing stance is their orientation to time is the past. They're focused on the past. The 4s typically ruminate on relationships, what's missing in their lives. 5s oftentimes think about all the information that they have collected and sort of need time and space and resources to sort of make sense of the data. And 9s think about the way their lives were, both in the recent and distant past. So all 3 numbers she describes as ponderers. The virtue that's repressed for the withdrawing stance is hope. So there's a despair quality that's potentially there for 4s, 5s, and 9s, and a hopelessness. So whatever imagination is, in this narrowly defined sense, right, of visualizing, in your mind's eye, projecting onto possibilities, fantasizing, what we intuitively know about fantasy is it's future-oriented, it's possibility-oriented, and it involves acting in the world. My spouse, who's a 2, is an example of the opposite of this, and 7s, I think, are the opposite of this. 2s and 7s frequently live in fantasy, and I have a 2 friend who would sing in the mirror and imagine herself on TRL, Total Request Live. There's a story of a tennis champion, I think it maybe is Djokovic, who he made a little tinfoil racket and imagined and visualized himself winning Wimbledon. So that's sort of, if there's aphantasia, that's like hyperphantasia. And 2s and 7s, are examples of that. So my quick take on this is I think aphantasia would be prevalent among 4s and 5s and 9s. If you interview 100 people who say they have aphantasia, most of them, I guess, will be 4s, 5s, and 9s. There may be other causes for aphantasia. I've read, that some people never have any fantasy, so not in their dreams, nowhere else. So there are probably lots of reasons why people have this condition. But for myself, and I think a particular kind of person who has trouble with fantasy, trouble with hope, trouble with visualizing the future, life goals, where do you want to be in 10 years, these kinds of things, the withdrawn stance is a place to look. And I think transformation is possible, and I've experienced some transformation with my own aphantasia that I can talk about another time. And so the transformation work for the withdrawing stance, in Suzanne and Stabile's terms, is to bring in more doing, to go to the fucking grocery store, to walk the dog, to really do what needs to be done, and that's hard. Speaking as a 4 in particular, the drudgery of kind of everyday tasks and routines is difficult to take on. And that's probably a little bit different for 5s and 9s, but in all cases, doing what needs to be done is really basic transformation work that we can start. And who knows, maybe that actually will have some impact on our capacity to visualize and imagine futures. Okay, so that's my hot take on aphantasia and the Enneagram.